Let's get across it now with the Daily Telegraph's political editor. Host here too was Sky News' US report. That's on tonight. And Outsiders on Sunday, James Morrow. James, we're nearly at the end of the working week, although not for you. You go all through the weekend. I get the weekend off. Hey, I want to pick up on the voice and all the other bits that go together with the Uluru Statement of the Heart. We know the Prime Minister said on election night, not just the voice, he wants the treaty and this so-called truth-telling commission. I call it revisionism about our history. The Greens today back that all in, but they want $160 million from taxpayers to negotiate a treaty. Now, these are all the elements that are going to be hotly contested between now and the next election. And it's hundreds of millions of dollars, which means I think none of these, voice included, are a foregone conclusion.
Well, look, I mean, Peter, we've spoken a lot about the voice here over the last few months, and I think the Greens have basically done, their old thing of saying the quiet part loud. For months now, you've been warning, I've been warning, a number of other commentators have been warning that with this voice, when you talk about the Uluru Statement, you're not just talking about, this voice, which all sounds very nice. The left is very skilled with language, and they can say, oh, but who wants to be against a voice to Parliament? Everybody loves that. But then sneaking in behind that, you've got the treaty, you've got the truth, which is, of course, code word for different laws, different sovereignties, and, of course, different contested versions of truth, essentially a divided Australia. I think in a weird sort of way, the Greens have almost done us a huge favor by reminding everybody that when you talk about the Uluru Statement, you're not just talking about, hey, we're going to have a nice little body and it's going to advise Parliament on the laws and things like that, which is what everybody wants people to think, because of course that sounds very hard to object to for most people who aren't deeply involved with the legalities and the politics of all of this and the mechanics of government and how that works. It's a great reminder that really the voice is only one step to a much more divided Australia. You only have to look what's happening across the Tasman Sea, Peter, to New Zealand, to where they've got a much more racialized politics than we do here as a result of having started to go down this road many years before. It's a cautionary tale, and let's really evaluate what they're talking about, not just the voice, but everything that goes along with it, Peter.
Truth-telling, I might say, I support it in the case of South Africa because the truth-telling occurred at a time where there were people alive related to crimes that had been committed against white, but predominantly against black South Africans. What's being contemplated here now is truth-telling about events that happened centuries ago, and I just don't think you can do that. I know historians don't support it as well. I was talking to Lord Jonathan Sumption at an event last night in Melbourne, and he's one of those who says you can't apologise today for crimes of the past from long ago. Let's go to Victoria. There's an election we know looming in November. The Premier, Daniel Andrews, was pledging yesterday. He says, we've got no plans, he says, to introduce any new taxes. Now, we haven't got short memories here on Credlin. Ahead of the 2014 election, he made a similar promise. Yet since that promise, he has introduced or increased 43 new taxes. It's like this line, James, we're getting out of the feds. They've got no plans, they say, to change those stage 3 tax cuts.
Yeah.
Andrew says no plans for new taxes, but we know what that happens.
Well, I mean, and look, as someone who grew up in America, Peter, I'm a bit reminded of, George Herbert Walker Bush's pledge back in the late 80s, early 1990s. Read my lips. No new taxes, he told the American people. And of course, that turned out to be not so much the case. Politicians can never be trusted when they say they're not going to raise taxes. But I think particularly in a state like Victoria, which is, so deeply dominated by the public service, the reason why Dan Andrews has so much support is because so much of the state is one way or the other employed or, otherwise, on the drip from the government. Of course, they need more money to just keep growing that and growing that.
Hey, the numbers man for Simon Holmes' Court's 2000 Climate 200 mob, Climate 200, he has quit, he has left. Pretty interesting. His name's Damien Hodgkinson. He was the money man. Does this mean the edifice of Climate 200 is starting to crumble?
Well, this is a really interesting thing to me because, of course, Damien Hodgkinson, he was, he wasn't just sort of the overall money man. He was also deeply involved with a number of the different campaigns. His name showed up all over the place. Nothing wrong with that, but it showed that there was, the Teal movement was a much more united force. A lot of people said it was actually a de facto party than just, this sort of, oh, hey, thing that sort of emerged out of community groups in various suburbs. Of course, that's a nonsense. If he goes, that's a lot of the organizing talent behind it. The other thing that I think is really interesting, Peter, is that this week the coalition and Deputy Opposition Leader Susan Ley made a real push to say, we're going to try and get these Teal seats back. We can't get majority government without getting these seats that have gone independent back. Of course, getting independent seats back, we know historically, is very hard to do in Australia, but it could very well be that it turned out to be a particular political product of a particular political moment in time around the last election that may not actually have staying power into the next election.
Hey, no problem chasing those seats. I say this as a former Liberal campaigner. Just don't waste money there to the exclusion of the seats you should be chasing out there in lower and middle class Australia. And the other thing, don't contort your policy to chase Green and Labor votes, because that'll end up losing you the Liberal Party middle.